Today, speaking at chapel, we have a special Wabash tradition called Senior Chapter. We have 4 seniors that we have asked to come forward and give us some their pearls of wisdom. Our speakers today are Ryan Horner. Ryan came to Wabash from a farming family in Greentown, Indiana, and through his 4 years here, he has been active in various clubs and organizations, and he is most thankful to his brothers and coaches on the cross-country and track and field teams. Next year, he will pursue his M.A. in creative writing at the University of California. Also speaking is Jacob Burnett. Jacob Burnett is a first-generation college student and a St. Joseph County Community Lilly Scholar from Mishawaka, Indiana. At Wabash, he majored in political science and was too involved in student activities. And would like to too involved in formal activities and would like to formally apologize for making the first floor of the library his social milieu in the past 4 years. Next year, he will be studying criminology at the University of Oxford. Also speaking is Sky King, who majored in creative problem solving and double minored in economics and Spanish. He is obsessed with the power of big ideas and is a big proponent of the human spirit. At Wabash, he was an active member of the Sphinx Club, Project Consume, Adman, and his fraternity, Lambda Chi. This summer, he will be returning to his native land to see the other side of paradise before joining Eli Lilly in the fall. Lastly, but not least, is Grant Klembara. Grant was born and raised in Dallas, Texas, and during his time at Wabash, Grant joined the Sigma Chi fraternity, served as the IFC president, played varsity football, and was, of course, a member of the Sphinx Club. In May, Grant will graduate with a bachelor's in rhetoric and a minor in economics, and is a part of the business sequence. Now that I've introduced them, I'll go one after another. Senior Chapel, starting with Ryan Horner.
Good morning, Wabash. Thank you to the Sphinx Club for this wonderful opportunity to stand up here with 3 seniors who I've admired for my 4 years here, and for the vote of confidence that what I'm going to share today is worth listening to. Stories, in my clearly unbiased opinion, are the lifeblood of our existence on this earth. I've put my faith deeply into this idea that stories can matter and can change our lives, and in the end are the way we make sense of a senseless world. In my limited time today, I don't want to mindlessly preach at you or for you to mindlessly listen. I want to do that thing that I think the best stories do. Take important moments or scenes and make them immediate and concrete, and then leave, zoom out. That's the kind of writing that I like to read and to create. Simple stories that smack you upside the head and then end, and leave you to your own devices to deal with what you've just read. I have no agenda, per se, other than to set in front of you a string of very human moments that might lead you to very human conclusions. It's the eternal human story, full of suffering and struggle, but also joy and incredible beauty. It's a concept so unbelievably large and convoluted that it doesn't take on real weight at first, not until we draw near, not until we become as intimate with the characters as we can, and then flee and seek the high ground, a place where we can look down on what we've seen and try to make sense of it. And then to retell it, to make it immediate, and to make it new. But the rewards of that, of this zooming in and then zooming out, are larger than we can possibly fathom. It's the eternal human story, but it's in the veins of each of us on this stage and each of you sitting in the pews. The eternal human story is in lingering over goodbyes and in rushing out the door to go meet friends. It's in early morning phone calls that rip the world apart, and in the early afternoon emails that send you dancing across the room. It's in the crisp air of August, and then the all-consuming grayness of January, bones stiff and windows frosted and lips chapped in a month that seems it will never end, under mountains and valleys of gray slush, but finally does. And it's in that first car ride of spring, when the air has a hint of warmth to it because the sun is finally doing its job again, and you turn the radio up to a dangerous level and lower the window and strain against the seatbelt to haul your entire arm outside just to feel the air going past. The eternal human story is in the friend who, during the hours of the night when you should be sleeping, bursts restless from the house to tramp the streets, and when you chase him, turns to you and blurts his fears and the things that make him shake in the night, and then howls at the stars. But it's also in your reaction to his words and to his howl, something that you feel almost spinally, because you too shake in the night. You too beat your fists on your thighs and hide from your worst thoughts and howl at the night sky when you have to. Though he might not know it, his words have become useful. They have managed to shrink that nearly infinite distance between two human souls or minds, a distance that seems so infinite because in the end it's only air, but only our words, once verbalized or written, can cross it. It's in the first time you find something you're good at, and the following months or years of easy progress, of talent and unbounded success, yes, but it's also in the 2 and 3 and 4 a.m., dry-eyed, achy-boned struggle a few years later when the progress doesn't come so easy. And it's in the final 6 a.m. stomach-dropping realization that though you'll get the research done or the project will be finished, it will be less than it could have been. And then the room will spin from the blood rushing to your head as you drop to your knees because of the realization that you are less than you could have been, and you will always be, because to chase any semblance of success in this world is to continually realize that you could have given more, but didn't. But it's also in reconciling yourself to those limits, to glimpsing the edge of yourself and then staring it down in the mirror, to working with that knowledge instead of resisting it, so that you can someday find your voice and then find answers to that eternal question that the poet Mary Oliver asked. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? It's in my stepfather, the man who raised me like a blood son, a short man with the personality of a giant who 4 years ago faced a tough diagnosis, and then faced radiation and faced chemotherapy and hormone therapy and more medications than I can count or pronounce, little orange plastic bottles scattered across the kitchen counter. And though it cost him a head full of hair, it's in his victory over that cancer. And it's in his second diagnosis 4 months ago, a second battle with cancer and all that that entails, but also a second victory of sorts. The eternal human story is in my stepfather sitting in Pioneer Chapel today, and no question about it, still smiling. The real hero's journey, I'm convinced, is not the climb upwards that ends in success and glory. The hero's journey is the spiral downwards, the falling that's still elegant. It is taking life's worst without losing yourself, without letting the losses make a monster of you. It's in keeping that smile. And it's in a million stories that we can't or don't know here at Wabash for one reason or another. It's in the hundreds of people we met in the jungles and mountains along the coast of Peru, but it's also in the thousands that we didn't meet or couldn't speak to if we had. It's in the silenced and the dead and in those not present at the table. It's in leaving space for those stories, though we don't know them yet, or else relinquishing the hope that they'll ever be told. It's in the senior who never thought he'd be standing at this podium, and in the freshman who wonders if someday he will, and in the faculty member who has seen it all before and will see it all again and is still moved every time. It's the world's story, our oldest story. But it's rewritten every single day, and if we ever hope to find each other in this darkness, we must try and retell it, to make it fresh and to make it hurt. We must make it new. Thank you.
Good morning, Wabash. Firstly, thank you to the Sphinx Club and Ryan Anzalone for inviting me to speak today. It's an honor and a privilege to share this stage with these three other speakers. Also, thank you to the professors and staff for whom I would not be here today otherwise. Lastly, and I know this is getting annoying, thank you to my mother because she is the closest person to a saint I've ever come across. And I also gave permission to some guys if I cried to heckle me, so it's totally okay. With my short time in front of you today, I want to make you feel uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable creates space within ourselves to be vulnerable. That vulnerability breeds courage. In essence, this talk is about being brave. It sounds easy enough, right? However, far too often on this campus and out in the real world, too many people fall victim to fear, or worse, in my opinion, staying silent. I know it may be hard for us to imagine the real world, mainly because we spend our time at Wabash, and Wabash is definitely not it. Because it lies on the outside of these scarlet halls where too many faces age faster than bodies. And where I have a dream has become I can't breathe. Wabash and the real world suffer from the politics of silence. I define the politics of silence as the distribution of power that allows certain people to speak, but also allows certain people to be heard. Two very different, yet equally demanding characteristics for equality. People have been demanding, marching, speaking, screaming, and dying for the recognition of their rights for years. But it's not enough to speak. You have to be heard. Part of what I do, and urge others to do, is not give a voice to the voiceless, but to help give weight to the words of the marginalized so that they gain the dignity and respect to tell their own stories, to experience their own linguistic celebration. I find that our duty as human beings and educated men and women is not just telling our own stories, but wholeheartedly investing time into listening to the stories we so seldom hear. We should also be vigilant in paying attention to the stories that aren't told, the stories brushed under the rug, the stories that, were we to hear, would make us uncomfortable. When we listen to others' stories, we learn more about the identity of the person speaking, but also about our own identity as we listen. In the heart of telling stories, I thought I'd share a dark one from my past that very few people have heard, mainly because I've so seldom tell it. However, it's such a common story, with so many actors have experienced the same thing, that it's kind of upsetting to me that we don't hear it more often, because when we hear them, we're more likely to act. Before I tell it, I want it to be clear, I do not want your pity, nor do I want to tell this story so that you feel bad for me. When I was little and younger, I was sexually abused by my cousin for a period of time. I remember little from the abuse, mainly because I've suppressed that, and I've also lost memories of my childhood that should be accessible to me. The abuse happened, and due to my silence, probably a lot longer than it should have, but eventually, somehow, unknown to me and to the horror of my family, the abuse was uncovered, and the perpetrator, my cousin, was sent away for a period of time to a juvenile detention center, and I was sent to therapy. And fast forward about 10 years or so, after suffering from an aneurysm, my cousin lied in his deathbed in a vegetative state. After we visited him in the hospital, my mother and I were walking through the hospital halls, and she turned to me and said, "Jacob, would you like to go back to the room that your cousin is in and forgive him for what he did to you?" But I told her that I already did. You see, growing up, I never saw the value of holding someone hostage to their past. I wanted my identity to be constructed by qualities such as mercy and redemption. To want that, I needed to live it. There is strength in the stories of identity, and I believe that we cannot have progress as a people without honest and authentic discussions of identity. Contrary to what many people may think, I wholeheartedly know the consequences of being silent. That's why my mother taught me to be loud. I grew up under the guidance of a strong, single mom whose epic tales of bravery could fill hours of chapel talks. I fully understood what it meant to be silent because we were so seldom heard far beneath the poverty line, a metaphoric line that has literal consequences. I'm lucky because Wabash invested in this poor kid whose dreams were bigger than the trailer park he spent his high school years in. They invested in my stories. I have the support of brothers, friends, professors, and staff who are willing to hear my stories and to share their own. They help add weight to my words. Now, I know that my life endeavor will be to do the same to those whose stories need to be told. Imagine if we could hear the stories of those whose lynched bodies lie deep in this country's ground. Maybe when walking through the rooms of students on campus, I wouldn't see Confederate flags hanging just like that strange fruit Billie Holiday wrote about in 1938. Imagine if we could hear the stories of Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Walter Scott, and Tamir Rice, and too many others. Maybe students wouldn't be as ignorant to discrimination because discriminations exist regardless if you've been discriminated against. Imagine if we could hear the stories of veterans returning from war with no support from those who sent them there in the first place. They tend to populate homeless shelters and street corners. Be sure to ask next time what it's like to fight for a cause so few truly understand the cost of. Imagine if we heard the stories of Matthew Shepard and other members of the LGBT community who find their stories cut short by the barrel of a gun, a fist, or a noose. Maybe students wouldn't be so quick to say things like, and I quote, "If I knew there was a gay player on my sports team, I couldn't or wouldn't shower with them." To which professors wouldn't have to respond with, "You probably already have." Or things like "die faggot." These stories share a common trope. Silence adorns the setting in which monsters of character thrive. These stories put something into perspective. Stories shed light on the privilege too many students on this campus wallow in. And I refer you to Professor Murillo's chapel talk expertly given last week if you wish to hear a more developed discussion of privilege, which I'm sure most of you will not. The reason we tell and listen to stories is because we can draw the common themes of life that link us together. It's harder to be racist, sexist, or bigoted when we listen to the stories of those who've had theirs imbued with discrimination and silence. In the end, death does not discriminate. And to die with dignity is to live with it, to let it consume you. For stories are the common link of humanity. When we sacrifice that, we have performed the ultimate injustice and have succumbed to the politics of silence. I urge every person to be brave because it's never the easy choice. To fight against the status quo, to choose people over profit, and to truly orient our spirits towards living humanely. Be brave because that gay kid growing up in poverty needs you to be. Be brave because that little girl who dreams of being more than a sexualized object needs you to be. Be brave because that black kid who will never know about the privileges of birth needs you to be. And lastly, be brave for yourself because cowardice has no place in the heart of the stories that history will remember. Thank you.
Before I get started this morning, I want to take a moment. I have a huge problem when people say something extremely open and honest, and then we just move on, and we don't think about it. So take 30 seconds, not in silence, but take 30 seconds to think about how you can be brave and to really think about what Jacob just said. Thank you, Wabash. Good morning, Wabash. I'm here to talk about the Wabash experience. I think a lot of us try and justify our experiences as the Wabash experience. I believe that we often try and force our experience here at Wabash and in the world on others. And we believe that somehow this benefits them. This question reminds me of a poem, one I'm sure that all of you know of and are familiar with. It is The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Now, this poem has become a kind of cliche because the last line of the poem is often cited without context to the rest of the poem. Two roads diverged in the wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. People often assume this poem is a mantra to the notion of being different, that by taking the odd road in life, you will somehow be better off for it. Frost himself has been quoted as saying that this poem is quite tricky, and I can tell you with some certainty that this message was not the one Frost intended with his poem. I will not dive further into the poem at this time, but I want you to keep this quote in mind. If the road less traveled by did not make all the difference, then what was the point of the poem? Last night, Grant brought up a question to me. He asked, does anyone seriously know why they came to Wabash College? Most of our friends describe it as a feeling. It just felt right. When people ask me, I like to say it was a punishment for my sins. Halfway joking. But in a way, it's true. I came to Wabash because I saw it as a place that I could rebuild myself. I was broken. I wanted to grow. I wanted to be disciplined, hardworking, world-changing, the man I thought I could become. The man I thought I wanted to become. I stand here very pleased to tell you that I am not that man that I envisioned. I came to Wabash for discipline, for focus, and what I found was entirely different. I found something that I so desperately needed, but had no idea I was looking for. There I stood, first semester sophomore year. How many of you have surpassed this mark? Congratulations. Sophomore year is the struggle. It is the grind. I bet most of you consider transferring. Can I get an amen? I know I did. And it all changed because of two men. On a particularly depressing night, I was sat down by two of my fraternity brothers and had one of the most impactful conversations of my entire life. It was Trey Fankhauser and Wes Zimmerman. I'm sure most of you know them and their antics. Well, Wes and Trey had both approached me that night to talk about the Sphinx Club, something that I hold very dear to my heart. A club that at the time I did not feel suited for. I was not a part of the Wabash community. I was a weird kid from California. Wes asked me if I was going out for the Sphinx Club. I said no, I was planning on transferring. Wes, if you know him, did not take that very well, and in the way that only Wes can, flat out told me, no, you're not. Okay. You're staying here, and you're going to be IFC president in Rhine next semester. Wes has a very powerful voice, and when he sets his mind to something, it's really hard to change it. But this forcefulness changed how I saw myself and Wabash. It made me feel included. I felt believed in. I felt different. Then Trey came in, the lover of the duo. He spoke of all the potential that he saw in me, that he thought I had, in the positive change that I could have here. These conversations literally changed the course of my Wabash experience and my life. For the first time, and this isn't here, Hawaii, or California, but for the very first time, I didn't just feel accepted, but believed in. When I look back on my Wabash experience, the words that come to mind are not discipline and hard work, but community. That is what I never thought I would find in central Indiana. But I did. I found chapel sing, unity, community, fraternity, love, support, belief, acceptance, curiosity, confidence. These are powerful words, and they have helped me along my path. I have found confidence through communal support. It took others believing in me for me to realize my true potential. And I will forever be in debt to Wabash for its experience. And of course, because of the price of tuition. Thanks, President Hess. So I ask you again, what is the Wabash experience? That was mine. And I think it's kind of a cliche. Here at Wabash, we boast about the Wabash Mafia. And it really is a strong, loving, supportive community. No matter which city I find myself in, New York, DC, I've found love and support by graduates of this institution or people touched by this college. I've been blessed by my friends that I've made through my fraternity and the Sphinx Club. But what about the other 50%? What about the Wabash population who isn't in fraternity, who isn't in the Sphinx Club? What was their experience? Here, I turn to a friend and a classmate of mine, a man who is not asked to speak today, but whose story deserves to be heard. That man is Rashid Yakubu. I spoke briefly with a classmate who met Rashid in their first week of freshman year. He described Rashid as confident, comfortable, especially for someone who's not only from Indiana, but from Ghana. Not Africa, which isn't a country, but a continent, but from Ghana, West Africa. I sat down with Rashid to have a conversation about his experience. In an attempt to make small talk, I said, Sparks food has gotten a lot better over the years. His response, man, I don't have time to worry about the taste of food. I've lived here on this campus for 4 years and there was no food over the summer. I had to fend for myself. Sparks is too convenient to complain. Rashid did not have his best friend's tailgate to get served a home-cooked meal and maybe a drink or two at each Saturday in the fall. Rashid wasn't catered faculty dinners each semester. Each year, Rashid had himself and the grind. Rashid is an international student. He said it's different for them. He knew he had to make it at Wabash because it was a do-or-die thing for his parents. This was his shot, and he had to take it. Rashid himself is not critical of any of this. Instead, he looks at it as a growing experience. He came to the U.S. to study, and he has stayed on that path. Both of his parents are PhDs, and he heavily values education. Rashid is a worldly man. Before Wabash, he lived in Germany, Ghana, and a year in the U.S. He has learned to survive in each environment because of his intellect. Rashid believes that intellect has the power to help bridge cultural arguments, and he has seen this in his experiences. Rashid's Wabash experience was comprised of these words: opportunity, coming of age, discipline, struggle, hard work, out of comfort zone, individuality, independence, survival. Notice how they're slightly different? They end at the same place: confidence. Back to the Robert Foss poem. 2 roads diverged in yellow wood, and sorry, I could not travel both, and be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as far that passing there had worn them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept first for another day, yet knowing how a way leads to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverged in the woods, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Frost was not saying that his road was the most significant, but that his road was his to take, and at the end of the day, you have to live your life. Besides, it really didn't matter which road you took. My Wabash story is different from Rashid's as can be, and yet where do we end up? Confidence. We found belief in ourselves, one through strength and independence, and one through the development of communities. At the end of the day, what is a Wabash man? What was the Wabash experience? Thank you.
All righty, good morning, Wabash. I'd like to begin by thanking the Sphinx Club, my brothers, for granting me this opportunity to speak today. Speaking at this podium as an undergraduate is an honor I will surely cherish. Thank you also to you, my Wabash family, for dropping in to listen to 4 of us who only have a few more moments left at this place. If you're not a Thursday regular, I encourage you to continue attending these chapel talks and take advantage of the opportunities to learn from members of our community. It's here where our people share their passions and reveal the things that make them tick. I'd like to first give a shout out to my grandparents who made it here today. Thank you for all the support over these last 4 years. My grandfather, when I was little, took me aside one day when I was kind of disappointed at how small I was compared to some of the other guys. And, he told me something that stuck with me for the last, 10 years or so. He said, the measure of a man is not in how tall he is, but what's in his heart. So I appreciate that. That was something that made a big impact on me. I also want to give a shout out to my roommates for showing up today. I assure you, of everyone here today, they're the most excited to hear me give some advice. So as I began to prepare for this talk, I found myself thinking, why in the world did I agree to do this, first off? And after all, what kind of things could I possibly say in this revered setting that would have anything of worth, I began to reflect on some of the lessons I learned while I was here, and today I do want to share a few of those with you. Yet amidst this reflection, I found myself feeling a very familiar emotion. One I felt so strongly the first time I walked across the mall 4 years ago with nothing but a red folder. At that time, I honestly didn't know a soul in this place. And believe it or not, I wasn't so keen on the idea of leaving my beautiful home in the Lone Star State to come to, cornfields and snow. All male? Really? And why, for goodness sakes, are these strange people wearing those white hats? What I felt was the fear of the unknown, and as many of us can attest to, this feeling can have a very real impact on our lives. I think it takes real courage to face our fear of the unknown. After all, I know I wasn't the only one who hesitated to send in their final deposit here. This past weekend, Purdue held a TEDx event where speaker Mamoun Hamid gave a talk titled, "Hacking Your Fears of the Unknown." In his talk, he gave a piece of advice that really caught my attention. He said, "Do not let your fears supersede your curiosity for the unknown." Let me repeat that. Do not let your fears supersede your curiosity for the unknown. I guess I had never really thought of the relationship between fear and curiosity like that before, but it made sense to me. Curiosity leads to new opportunities, relationships, and paths you otherwise might have missed. It prompts you to question what you're taught and what you think you know, and it leads to innovative thinking and unique experiences. So, for what it's worth, here's my first piece of advice. If you want to get the most out of your Wabash experience, stay curious, and don't let your fear of the unknown or your fear of failure guide your decision making. This takes courage, like I said, but I really think it's worth it. Consider the men sitting up here today. Sky recently was curious about why our society has become so comfortable with using and producing so much unnecessary waste. So what did he do? He began Project Consume. Jacob was curious about criminal injustice, and so he applied and received a scholarship that will take him to Oxford to study criminology. Ryan wanted to pursue his curiosity in fictional story writing, so he's heading to UC Davis this next year to study creative writing and write what I think will be the next great fiction novel of our generation. It was curiosity that brought me here. Without it, I wouldn't have tried my luck in the fight-out bouts. Or I wouldn't have accepted a leadership role in the IFC, or I wouldn't have taken some amazing courses that I took outside my major and minor. As Dr. Ann Boss mentioned in her chapel talk a few weeks ago, sometimes our path isn't clear until we dip our toes in the water. So have confidence in your education and experience here. And as she said, get your feet wet. I really appreciate that advice. So I don't know if Dr. Boss is here today, but thank you for that. Nowadays, when I walk across the mall, the feeling is much different. The fear has been replaced by nostalgia. I think of the time my pledge brothers and I stood staring at the flagpole with our faces covered in red and black paint as we belted out Dear Old Wabash during chapel sing. I think of the times during Rhineship when I found a nice dry patch of grass to do an air raid, Or when we'd yell those echoing words we hear every Thursday morning. Go to Wabash, or go to chapel, excuse me. Go to Wabash, too, I guess. I remember the time I helped Jim Walsdorf, Peter Fouts, and Ollie Bauer push Steve Magura around the mall in a grocery cart as we ducked and dodged flying debris. To this day, I don't think I've ever been so tired. I have great memories of casually strolling along the mall, catching up with professors, staff members, or fellow students, as well as a few memories of not so casually sprinting across the mall to make it to my class that just started. I will certainly bear some sweet memories of this place. Yet until recently, when people ask me why I went to Wabash, especially from Texas, I feel like I haven't been able to give a good answer. In fact, most of the time, I'll just say, I don't know. It's a great question. And yes, it's easy to fall back on some of the other standard answers we have. I came here to play sports, or because it's a really good academic school. But when we get down to it, we know those answers don't really capture the full truth. They just don't suffice. The truth is, it is very hard for many of us to put our finger on why we came here and why we stayed. We just seem to know it's right. Seriously, think of how many people you've talked to who came here on Honor Scholar Weekend and left saying, it just felt right. We have an enormous amount of loyalty and pride for this place, and yet we struggle to explain or justify our reason or our decision to be here. We often end the conversation by saying something to the effect of, well, you just have to understand, you won't understand it unless you've experienced it. So looking back as a senior, I'm beginning to get it, I think. And with the help of another TED Talk, I know I'm a little obsessed with those things, titled Start With Why, I think I've made a bit of a discovery. In his talk, Simon Sinek talks about the importance of starting with why. He says that successful companies or institutions do not define themselves by what they do or how they do it, but rather why they do it. This is what breeds inspiration and loyalty. And this is why I believe we stay at Wabash. I think this is true for students, faculty, and staff. We are attracted by the clarity of Wabash College's why. The people who come here and stay have an affinity for challenge. We buy into the idea that this place is a training ground for young men who desire to be better than the average college student. And the evidence is everywhere. Consider the emphasis placed on the gentleman's rule or the mission statement. How many other college students do you think know the college's mission statement by heart? You see it in the students who decided that they would forego a normal college experience for something that demands more than casual work. You see evidence in the dedication and constant support of our professors who support us in our extracurricular activities and even sometimes call you when you're late or absent from class. You see it in the administration, the staff members, and coaches who consistently sacrifice time that they could be spending with their family to do a little more for the college outside of office hours. You see it in the alumni that live hundreds of miles away from Wabash and yet still will round up a group of 20 or more alumni to talk to a high school prospect over dinner. This buy-in to the mission is what makes Wabash special, and it's what separates us from other liberal arts colleges. So never take for granted the amount of amazingly talented people that walk by you here each day. So I'll leave you with this. First, don't let fear supersede your curiosity for the unknown. This place offers a unique opportunity to take chances and to try something new, so take advantage of that. Second, the next time someone asks you how you ended up at Wabash, remember the why of Wabash College. It may help you verbalize your feelings about this place. Wabash, thank you for an incredible 4 years. To my seniors, thank you for all the memories. Keep fighting the good fight. Thank you.